Not entirely, but I do. I mean, I share your cynicism about the motivation for this. It's clearly a cheap attempt to sort of buy votes. But I think regardless of that, I'd make 2 points. The first is that we ought to have an age of majority in this country. We ought to agree when people become an adult. And for some things we say it's 16, and for some things we say it's 17, and for some things we say it's 18, and for some things we still say it's 21.
Mm.
Now,
Mm.
pick a number as a society. Don't just try and pluck things out like voting, but clearly for partisan political advantage, and actually have a proper age of majority.
The vote to 16 and 17-year-olds in its first year in government if it wins the election. It's going to make 1.5 million people newly eligible to vote, the largest change to the electorate since 1969, when the voting age was reduced from 21 to 18. This is the Labour leader, Sir Kier Starmer, explaining why he's pushing for it.
They can go out and work, they can serve in our armed forces, and of course if they are out and working they pay tax, and therefore they should have a say over how the money they're paying in is being used. So yes, I want to see that vote for 16 and 17-year-olds. If you can work, if you can pay tax, if you can serve in your armed forces, then you ought to be able to vote.
Rosie, let's be honest. Keir Starmer's doing this because he reckons 16 and 17-year-olds are going to vote Labour.
I mean, yeah, traditionally we obviously get quite a lot of the young vote, but I certainly knew what I wanted to vote by the time I was 16. I left school just after that, and I was really politically active.
Were you a typical 16-year-old though, Rosie?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think I was. I was really inspired by, bands at the time, and my political activism was about apartheid in South Africa, and it was about animal rights and animal welfare. And I've probably changed some of my views since I was 16, but those main things are things that I'm also involved with now in Parliament. So I think young people do know their own minds. And if they know their own minds at 16 and they change them by the time they're 30 or 60, so what? We've still got a picture of what young people think at the time. And I think if you think politics don't touch young lives, then you're really naive. Some children are carers, and all of the things that are involved in that, and with the benefits system, they really have a stake in. And I think I'd be happy to know how they think and what they'd like to see us do as politicians.
True, but I suppose politics touches every child's life, but you've got to draw the line somewhere. Christine, go on.
We have voting at 16 in Scotland. And it does engage young people. And if you go, as we all do as politicians, to schools and talk, you will find that 16 and 17-year-olds are very engaged in politics. Absolutely. But if you deny them the right to vote, then they become a wee bit kind of disillusioned with politics. But if they feel part of the political system, then they will vote. And as Keir, I don't often agree with Keir Starmer, but I do agree that if you are going to say to people, if you go out to work, you will pay tax, you can be in the armed forces. In Scotland, you can get married at 16. Why are you denying them the right to vote? Well, in Scotland, we don't, and it works.
Damien, Anna, going to get your thoughts in just a moment. First, though, let's hear from Peter Hitchens, who spoke to us about this a bit earlier on. He argues 16 is just too young.
There are lots of things you aren't allowed to do till you're 18, for instance, drinking in pubs, smoking cigarettes, or indeed getting a tattoo. And I think a lot of people would say these are quite sensible ages to do it, again, because of the issue of judgment, which we all implicitly, including, I'm sure, Sir Kier Starmer in his own life, all implicitly recognise as a fact that there are ages at which people are more and less able to make rational judgments about major issues.
Damien, are you with Peter Hitchens on this one?
Not entirely, but I do. I mean, I share your cynicism about the motivation for this. It's clearly a cheap attempt to sort of buy votes. But I think regardless of that, I'd make 2 points. The first is that we ought to have an age of majority in this country. We ought to agree when people become an adult. And for some things we say it's 16, and for some things we say it's 17, and for some things we say it's 18, and for some things we still say it's 21. Now, pick a number as a society. Don't just try and pluck things out like voting, but clearly for partisan political advantage, and actually have a proper age of majority. And the other point I'd make is, I mean, as Christian said, I very much enjoy debating with 16 and 17-year-olds. It's one of the joys of being an MP, that you do that a lot. And for years, ever since this has been on the horizon, I've asked them all, do you think 16-year-olds should have the vote? And what I found fascinating is it normally cuts about 50-50 either way. And my most vivid memory is of one, I think they were 18 by then, so they were going to vote in an upcoming election. And they said, I've got a 16-year-old brother and I wouldn't give him the vote. He's not remotely responsible enough to have the vote. So quite a lot of 18-year-olds don't think 16-year-olds should have the vote because they know them very well.
True, and I'm sure there'll be people listening and think, I know someone in my 50s who I don't want voting. So I suppose it is all
Exactly.
relative. Anna, when you were 16, were you itching to go to the ballot box?
Well, no, look, I was very politically engaged. I was gearing up to study politics at university. I certainly didn't have the bug like Rosie in that respect. But I defer to what Damien said, which is there is actually legally, people are adults at 18. There is a legal definition which Kier Starmer will know better than anyone, and I do think that should be when the vote is as well, because what I would really like, I mean, I think there is that argument for boosting engagement that way, but I would prefer politicians to talk about boosting engagement by investing in schools, for example, improving at that age education over history, over politics, over sociology, to get people prepared and excited about using that vote at 18 to boost voter turnout at 18, which is low, as we've talked about. But the truth is, and the world we live in, is that there isn't the money for that, and there isn't the budget for that. And this is the kind of policy that I think Labour will be looking at introducing if they come into government, because, you know, it costs nothing, but it's eye-catching. And they'll have very little money to play with.
Yeah, and it was interesting earlier on, Anna, that you mentioned that Rishi Sunak will be, broadly speaking, pleased with the coverage of his national service announcement a bit earlier on.